What are the other measures you formally put in place with the ownership that sort of give you a sense of where you're at in that journey?
I think you got to start with talent. Our league's just so tough. Really to get to the championship level like you're talking about.
How do you see the expansion changing the talent landscape?
I think it was a few different things, one of which was the growth of some of our key pieces, and then obviously the addition of Carl Smesko and our coaching staff. I said this ain't going to be quick. Like, it takes time, and our two biggest things were be a great teammate and work really hard. Once they actually see the product, you usually have them hooked because it's just such a beautiful game.
Today on The Sixth Woman, we are joined by one of the most respected basketball executives in the women's game. Dan Padover is a general manager and executive vice president of basketball operations for the Atlanta Dream, and is widely regarded as one of the sharpest roster builders in the WNBA. Since joining the Dream in 2021, Dan has led the team's rebuild, drafting Rookie of the Year Ryan Howard and building a competitive roster around her through small trades and free agency. Before Atlanta, he played a key role in building the Las Vegas Aces into a championship contender. We're recording this conversation at a particularly interesting moment for the league, with ongoing CBA negotiations creating a level of uncertainty about the future landscape of the WNBA. So today's discussion focuses on the basketball side of the game, roster construction, building a championship team, expansion, and where the global women's game may be heading next. Let's welcome Dan Padover. Dan, when you think about building a championship roster in today's WNBA, what are the core principles you start with? What absolutely has to be in place for a team to compete for a title?
I think you got to start with talent. Our league's just so tough. You got to have talent to win. And then I think really to get to the championship level, like you're talking about, the pieces need to fit. Everyone needs to complement one another. And I think one thing we've seen over the years is continuity really matters as well. Like getting reps, competing with, your teammates, going through tough times, big wins, tough losses, growing as a team. Usually to get over and to finally win, it takes some time of at least a core group being together.
And Dan, with that, in your situation, what takes a 30-win team to a championship team?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just that, right? A lot of it is, you've got the foundation in place, and it's what fine tuning can you do? So maybe it's a roster move here or there. Maybe it's just reps. Maybe it's you just need to see a couple good things happen, and then it's a snowball effect. But the goal is to consistently put yourself in a position to compete for a championship, and then things take over. But the hardest thing is getting a team to a point where they can consistently do that. And then the next hardest thing is getting there. So those are the two things what we're focusing on right now.
I mean, Tony just said, what does it take to get from a 30-win team to a championship team? We know that in 2024, Atlanta went from 15 wins to 30 wins in 2025. So let's take a step back and ask, what are the two or three things or decisions that drove that turnaround or helped that turnaround to go from 15 wins to 30 wins in a season?
I think it was a few different things. One of which was the growth of some of our key pieces. Obviously, Naz Hillman, Alicia Gray, Ryan Howard all had career years. And then we had some key additions, BG, Bree Jones, Pow Pow. And then obviously the addition of Carl Smesko and our coaching staff. So a little bit of internal growth, a little bit of added pieces, a little bit of another year together. And you combined all those things together, and we took a really big leap that we were all happy about.
I'm interested, Dan, how much does luck come into it as well? Particularly around injury, health, players developing faster than you might have imagined when you first selected them?
Yeah, certainly there's a component of luck when it comes to injuries and health. And you always, want to be at full strength to be able to compete at your best. I think part of it is the timing of all things happening in a positive way at the same time. And to have a great year, it can't just be one thing that goes well. You need to have a few things go well. So I think, like I just mentioned, I think we hit a critical point of a few players being together the right amount of time where things were starting to click. I think Carl and his coaching staff did a phenomenal job and really came into our league at the right time and started teaching principles that really, really helped our squad grow. And then I think we, as a franchise, were at a point where some people saw what we were doing and wanted to jump in and join us. And all of those being able to happen at the same time, I think that's when you make a big leap, is when multiple good things happen.
You'd need patience and trust and faith that it's not just luck, but even if it is luck, then carrying that wave.
You have to have patience, and I give our ownership group a lot of credit, led by Larry Gottesdiener. That I said this ain't gonna be quick. Like it takes time, and last year was year 4, and you finally started to see some of the plans and goals we had start to come out of it. But where this team was in 21 when we took over and where it got to, like, it's a completely different team. No one's remaining, but that takes time.
I'm probably interested in that wins and losses is an absolute measure of where we're at. But what are the other things you formally put in place to try to, because you're on a journey here to build from where you were in 2021, what are the other measures you formally put in place with the ownership, with your executive team, with your coaching staff, that sort of give you a sense of where you're at in that journey?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things, and, it sounds cliche, but it's the people. And from every player to every staff member we brought in, like our 2 biggest things were be a great teammate and work really hard. And we haven't really left those 2 principles, and everybody that comes in is here for the dream. They're here to serve our players, and they're here to take this organization to the next step. And as you see more success and as you have more people come into an organization that can feel that, it's really neat to see. I'll give just, an anecdotal note. Naz Hillman had her jersey retired a couple weeks ago at the University of Michigan. Yeah. And we didn't mandate anything. We didn't tell anybody they had to do anything, but we had 4 or 5 players fly out to Ann Arbor to support her, had probably a dozen staff members fly out to Ann Arbor to support her. Just something that, like, it's in the DNA of who we are to show up and be there for one another. And I think that is just a testament to the people that we've brought in and who all these humans are.
Yeah, that's people and culture. That's if a team wants to do something that's not mandated, if staff and an organization wants to do something that's mandated, it kind of just shows from the outside. It shows the trust and respect and support that you guys give each other, which then that's what flows onto a court. And when we see that chemistry with the girls, that's what flows onto a court, and what's so great to be able to watch.
And how much more difficult is that? And I suppose you look at college basketball with the transfer portal now and people being able to move and moving into the professional game with free agency. How much more difficult, or what are the difficulties in building that cultural piece, Dan, where players move quite regularly and they often go and play with other teams in the off-season?
Yeah. We've been really lucky here. And part of it is, we scout for this, we do research on this, but the players we've brought in to this organization and the people we've brought in, they're really selfless. They really want to see others do well, not just themselves. And the nature of, our league right now is obviously, like you mentioned, there's other leagues, but it's such a small circle that people stay so connected year round. And with technology, everyone's really, connected with each other 12 months out of the year. And one of the best things for us is Atlanta is an extremely appealing market. So whether we're in season or not, Our players are always spending time here, which allows them to be around one another and be around our staff. And that's been a huge advantage for us. It's just the market itself. It's really appealing to young people. There's a lot to do. The weather's great. And people just love being in Atlanta, which has made a huge difference for us. We don't have to ask them to come visit. They just show up.
For those that don't know much about Atlanta, I mean, I've grown up on a lot of American film and American culture, so I understand a little bit. What makes Atlanta as a city so special to have an organization like yours in?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just like a great community that has something for everybody. I mean, it's about 15 to 20 different neighborhoods within a city that, whether, I've got young kids and we got to do family activities, or one of our players may be a single 25-year-old looking to have fun or go shopping. There's just something to do for everybody. The weather is great. Obviously we were named after Dr. Martin Luther King, and I think the history there for our players and our athletes it just means a little more to play for a team like that. So just a very vibrant area that's easy to get to, and people just really enjoy it.
I've heard the food's amazing. I'm a big foodie. There's apparently a very large Ethiopian community there, so shout out to my Ethiopians. And I'm really, when I come there, I need someone to show me around, because that's what I want to experience.
Yeah. We got you. You let us know. Well, Liam is like a Australian-born Atlanta native now, so he can give you everything. No, you hit it on the food's great. Music culture is great. Film culture is great. There's a ton to do down here.
And the good thing is, if you don't like it there's a big enough airport, you can get to basically anywhere directly in the United States, so you're in good shape. But if we move a little bit from the human side, you might call it that, the personality side, your background, you started your career as a video analyst and back in college and volunteering. And analytics for you seems to be a strong theme through your career trajectory. And we're interested in understanding, when do you rely on analytics and when do you go back to the eye of looking at something? And what's the balance?
Yeah, I think you have to have a balance. I think with every decision, there's a lot that goes into it. One is, the eye, and part of the eye is, what have you seen in person versus what have you watched on film, right? Then there's, background on the individual, what the person's like, culture fit, character fit. And then there's the numbers. And the beautiful thing about the numbers is they're concrete. Like, that's not just somebody's opinion telling you what they think. But you have to really balance that with, okay, they have these numbers, but they may have been in this conference or in this league, and they may have been, the only good player on that team. So you have to really look at the whole body of work and every different aspect. I personally really value the data and analytics from two different standpoints. One is, sometimes it's a cosign. Like, if my gut and my eye sees something and the numbers are telling me the same thing, then I feel really confident in a decision I'm about to make. And then the second is when somebody or some player is popping in the analytics and we haven't had our eyes as much on them, or we didn't think we saw something. It's like, all right, let's dive back in here and see, why the numbers are popping and why we're not seeing something. So I think it's a great tool. Like anything, I don't think it's the only tool. I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's a great tool.
I mean, another piece of the puzzle would be about operations. So what operational investments would you say have had a huge impact, or the biggest impact, if we're talking about facilities, staffing, players? What do you feel like has helped Atlanta Dream the most?
Yeah, again, it goes back to when new ownership took over the team in 2021, the number one thing was, let's increase and improve the player experience. And it starts with the people we put around our players, right? Like, whether it's health and wellness or player development or basketball ops, we try to make sure we have the best possible people around our players so that the only thing they focus on is the game itself. Anything they need, whether it's a dinner reservation in Atlanta, they got family coming into town, they need something, they need a new stim unit. anything the players need, we try to take care of so that they solely focus on the game, and we try to treat them well, right? Like, obviously, when we're on the road, we stay in first class accommodations, meals after every practice, every game. So you try to take, all those little things that the players would usually have to worry about. You take that off and just have them focus on the game itself.
Beautiful.
Now, I heard you say in an interview, and I really enjoyed this quote, that you said you were talking to a particular owner or talking about a particular owner, and you said they don't get worried when a new general manager gets appointed. They get worried when a new owner comes in because of there's an element of vision, arms race, resources. How do you see that playing out over the next 3 to 5 years in the league?
So that is a huge thing that I believe in. I think we're very fortunate to have a great ownership group that is willing to invest in these players and these athletes. And, I think overall it's, organizations that are willing to put their players first are going to have advantages. And I think that's one of the reasons, we've had some successes because we've been willing to put our players first.
Some of us have vaped around little brothers and sisters. These kids could be breathing toxic chemicals without them even knowing. I don't think it's worth it vaping at all.
Well, let's move on to the landscape of the future landscape of the league, because there's a lot going on. Give the context of, obviously there's a labour negotiation happening. There's expansion. How do you see the expansion changing the talent landscape and how you look at where you pull talent from?
Yeah, great question. Well, obviously there's going to be more roster spots in our league, right? Everybody knows that. So where does the talent come from? And I think, as you've alluded to before, and when we've discussed, like, we are growing from an international standpoint and having more and more of an international influence in our league. And I expect that to continue. I expect more college draft picks to stick on rosters than previously. Just by the sheer nature of volume, we need a new pipeline to create new stars, new players. We're going to be at 15 teams this year. We're going to get up to 18 before we know it. So I think two new huge pipelines will be international and then continuing to develop our college players.
I mean, that's what the international was going to be sort of the next question. But if we jump to development, how much has the WNBA shifted towards development of players over the past 5 years and in your experience with the team?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important. It's definitely something that all teams have a keen eye on. The hard part is previously our season happens and, our cadence of games is so quick that you just don't have time. But now what teams are doing is, we're all hiring dedicated player development staff so that someone who doesn't get minutes in a game, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, these people can focus with the players, whether it's pre-shoot around, post-shoot around, days off when starters are getting their rest. And we're all investing in that staff because this is going to be the next level of player that next year, hopefully they boost up and hit the rotation. But you need them to stay engaged, keep working on their game when they're not able to get high quality minutes. And I think all teams right now are really focused on that because we all know we need the next wave of player in our organization.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one with the interested in additional resources. We talked earlier about the operation side. In the search for talent, and given the international breadth, and take, for example, at the moment, the Women's World Cup qualifying, how much more resourcing are you putting into that space? Because they're not just in front of you in college basketball, are they?
No. I think all of our teams' scouting budgets have significantly increased in the last few years. Just because we know you got to get eyes on players, whether it's, to your point, at a world competition, whether it's in club play in a different, organization. But before it used to be, teams would just go to conference tournaments at the end of the collegiate season because you could see a lot of players in one setting. But now it's not even just November to April anymore. Like, we had somebody out last summer at the qualifiers, watching that. So it's 12 months a year, always scouting for talent, because that's what will give you the edge.
Bez, you're familiar with Izzy Borlase and Nadu Pooch, and obviously you had Paul Goris on your coaching staff for a period of time. Is that an example of how they came onto your radar, or were they there through your own resourcing in any case?
Yeah, both. I mean, we all knew they were both going to be draft picks that year, but having someone who was familiar with both of those players on our staff absolutely helped. And I think, that's just an added bonus of continuing to grow your network, whether it's, internationally, in different landscapes, so that you have more intel, you just have access to different players. I think it was definitely an advantage.
Are you claiming Izzy's success in the WNBL this season?
No, we can't. We cannot claim that. That was all her. That was all her.
Just sort of last question around this thing, and it's something that we're not, by we, I mean Australian landscape, whenever it comes to basketball, isn't necessarily familiar with the concept of NIL. But how will NIL continue to change the pathway for players from college basketball into WNBA, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am not that privy to the dynamics around that, just because we've been, so focused on a professional model, which I know that's, headed that way. So to date, I haven't seen a lot of change from what, is entering our league. But I would imagine that over time, if anything, our players will be a little bit more used to the business component of sport than previously, right? Where, before you went to college for 4 years, you stayed there, and then you come into our league where there's a little bit more movement. So I think the whole player movement aspect, free agency, all that, I think players will be a little bit more understanding of the business of sport when they come into our league than they previously have.
I think the other thing that may come into play is also athlete expectation, and you alluded to it before in terms of and I love your focus on, as an organisation, on player first, and I think in some ways my sense of the NIL situation in college, particularly with the transfer portal of being able to move, there's just an expectation now going into an organisation that you are going to provide the best environment possible for them as an athlete.
Yep.
And that bar that bar will continue to get raised, I think. And it's always been a challenging transition for, a college athlete. Go back 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, they are in first-class facilities with first-class travel and potentially private charters, and they came into the WNBA or even an overseas league, and it's like they've taken 3 steps back.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think right now the beautiful thing about the W is it is the elite league, and everybody strives to be in it, and players get treated as such. And to your point, I think, some people may have said before that wasn't the case. I think there's no doubt anymore. The way the players are treated, the way that our league operates, second to none.
I think I'd love to talk to you a bit about leadership and your career path. And I wanted to make sure we had enough time to do this, because I think we've spoken with athletes and coaches, but when it comes to career development and how you go from studying university, working in media, to then running a women's organization, and one that obviously this whole podcast is based around, what drew you to committing your career to women's basketball?
Yeah, I think I got really lucky that I was an undergrad at UConn, where it was like you wouldn't know the difference between any sport, whether it was women's or men's, because everybody was treated equally, and quite frankly, everybody was good. I love basketball. I didn't see, you asked why women's, I didn't really see it that way. I just wanted to work in basketball no matter what it took. women's, men's, college, pro, international. It really wouldn't have mattered to me. I was dead set that I wanted to work in basketball, and I knew I just had to get in however I could. And early on, it was kind of the days where the Eric Spoelstra story was really high about how he came in as a video person, and that was kind of the top of mind. Was if you weren't a former player and you wanted to get in, you got to get through the video room. So I took that advice and just tried to find the first opportunity I could. And I caught a couple big breaks, and then just, good things tended to happen to me.
Dan, you're telling us you weren't a former player in any sense?
Ball boy, wiping the sweat off the court,
I was
something.
a former player. I just didn't say I was a good one.
Look, in terms of leadership skills, I was interested. You've worked with some interesting people in your time, Bill Laimbeer being one of them. What were some of the takeaways from Bill in his role and working so closely with him?
Yeah. First of all, it was an awesome experience. I learned so much from Bill, and, a great mentor and an even better friend. He was around professional basketball for so long, having started playing in the early 80s, coaching, through the 2020s. So about 40 years of pro basketball. And I think the biggest thing was like, he just kept going. Like, bad loss, player fight, coach argument. Like, you drop it and you just go to the next game and you get a win. And you don't harp on anything too small. You just try to get the next win, and then good things happen. So his ability to have that type of tunnel vision and to keep people focused on the main thing, it was amazing. And it's one of the things I try to do and have tried to mirror in my time.
The last question I want to ask you in this area, I have a lot of friends that work in media, and there's some really great media platforms in Australia that are blowing up globally. For those who want to have a career path like yours, or they go from video coordination to being a GM, or just want to work in the WNBA or in sports media in a front office environment, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think the first and most important thing is just do your current role, your current job as best as you possibly can, because that's how you become a master at certain areas. That's what gets you noticed, and people want to put more on your plate and give you more responsibility. And then sounds simple, but work really hard, be a great teammate, and don't expect anything back. Just know that the harder you work, the more you're there for people. That's what's gonna have people want to advocate for you, to want to give you new opportunities. And then you got to have persistence. This is a really, really tough field, not even just to get into, but to continue to grow in. So it's normal to feel, a little discouraged at times, or like, man, I want to catch this break and I haven't yet. But you just got to keep going and keep pushing, and just know that the more persistent you are, those are the ones who continue to grow and have good opportunities come their way.
That's beautiful.
The great thing too is in women's basketball, it is a growth industry. It's in a growth phase, and it's certainly
there's so many opportunities.
Yeah, and just putting yourself, it's terrific advice from. Speaking of advice, we sort of moved to a segment we call Rapid Fire. People hang on every word you say here, Dan. So we get a little itchy here because Beza likes to have one-word answers, and I like to have longer word answers, but
we take it in turns being that person.
So let me fire out first. First question for you, and again, one word answer if you can. But if you could change one thing in women's basketball tomorrow, what would it be?
More people understood how great it was. Sorry, that's too long.
No, that was too hard to do one word.
Yeah.
If you were, what's one thing about running a WNBA franchise that fans would be surprised to learn?
It's 80% non of the fantasy basketball stuff that everybody thinks it is. It's a lot of general management, not trades and drafting.
Alrighty. How many games of basketball do you watch each week?
10.
Okay, that's a decent amount.
That's a decent amount.
Do you watch it from start to finish, or do you skip through it?
No, and I don't watch it live a lot of the time.
For what's happening over there, so I guess some of our Aussie and international viewers can maybe pick up some names. What are 3 young players in the global women's game that you're excited about?
Oh, that's easy. I'll go with Borlase, Potch, and Kone.
Yeah. Look, we may have done that on purpose. We had a feeling you might say some of those.
And also, he's not going to give away any of his potential draft picks coming up in the WNBA draft. Okay, one word to describe some of your players. So one word to describe Naz Hillman.
Tough.
Jordan Canada.
Quick.
Ryan Howard.
Smart.
Izzy Borlase.
Exciting.
All right. So to wrap out, women's basketball's grown all around the globe, which is part of the reason we love it, and we know that's part of the reason you love it and part of the reason why you've dedicated your career to this. What gives you the most optimism about the future of global women's basketball?
Yeah, I started my career in New York with the Liberty, and I lived in Manhattan, and I actually had a car at the time because our facility was outside of the city. So I would come home from work and park my car and walk to my apartment, probably pass by, dozens of people every day from my walk, just decked out in Liberty gear. I think in 8 years, maybe one person said something to me about the Liberty. I can't go anywhere in Atlanta if I have a Dream quarter zip on and I, sit down or walk by, someone's saying something. So that's just like a human, real life experience of how many people know the brand, know the teams, are watching, the visibility it has. And a lot of that is without them even actually sitting down and watching a game. That's just the overall visibility. Once they actually see the product, you usually have them hooked because it's just such a beautiful game that we all watch every day.
For our future guests on this show, I'd love for you to be able to ask one question. You don't know who our future guests are going to be, but just one question that we can ask them that we can say came from you.
I'd say, what keeps you motivated?
Beautiful.
Hey, Dan, we really appreciate your time. We know it's it's an interesting time, it's fair to say, in the WNBA at the moment. We wish you the best for the next week and maybe the next 8 weeks. We're all hanging on the edge to make sure this season happens and the absolute momentum in the game is continued. So thank you very much for your time. We're all Dream fans now. We love Naz, we love Jordan, we love Izzy. And
we'll either hopefully see you someday in Australia or someday to get a good feed in Atlanta.
That's right. You let us know when you guys make your way over here. We'll treat you to a great dinner.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dan.
Well, Beza, what an interesting conversation and what an interesting guy in the sense of where he's come from and where he's at and building the Atlanta Dream. And I suppose for me particularly, the internationalization of talent identification is such a relevant thing, not just the last 5 years, but the next 5 years to come.
I really love the passion behind how he spoke as well. Like you can just see from the way he spoke through his eyes that he has so much belief, not just in his team, but in himself, that he's in the right place, that this is where he's meant to be. I really loved his answer to when we discussed going from a 30-win team to a championship team and then from a 15-win team to a 30-win team.
A really clear plan.
Absolutely. And the focus on consistency and continuity. And then I also really thought that last question to do with media and going from working in media to being in front office. There are so many young people and so many talented people in the creative industries who may not have a path or a vision to where they want to go next, or think that, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do forever, that there isn't necessarily a sidestep that they can do. It doesn't have to be a completely different path, but a sidestep where they can utilize all the skills they have in media to benefit a career in a slightly different way. So
I think the other thing that's optimistic is that you could actually pick a career in women's basketball now in the front office or in coaching or in support staff and actually see that the growth over the next 5 to 10 years, your career could be there. Whereas I don't think that was the case 10 or 15 years. Yeah. You almost had semi-volunteer, you had scrimp and skate, whatever it might be. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, and I think the last point I want to say is also opened my eyes to UConn and his experience with, it was just sport. It wasn't women's sport. It wasn't men's sport.
It was really interesting,
he said it was equal. To him, it was just that the level of the talent that they were experiencing was equal, the level of excitement, and obviously the way UConn is running their programs, it's amazing. And hopefully more colleges and universities start running programs in that way.
And it's always nice to talk to somebody who's got a link to Australia with, Jordan Canada played out here, Nars Hillman made such an impact in the WNBL. Izzy Borlase is going to make a big impact going over to the WNBA. Nadu Pooch.
Yeah.
So that's exciting as well. So we've got to wrap it up, but over to you.
I can't wait to also ask that question about what motivates them to whoever our next guest is. So, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Dan, for that amazing conversation. Thanks, T, for being my amazing co-host as always.
Don't forget the watch Sidelined. It's all up now.
Absolutely, Sidelined. All the episodes are up there. Such an important conversation and topic. And I can't wait for our next episode, Tony. Whatever comes next in the ever-changing landscape of women's basketball, stay tuned on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, however you listen to us, and we'll see you on our next episode.